Hey everybody, I am Luna Willows,
And I'm Jenna Pierce. We'd love to welcome you to our podcast, The
the
Flow
Flow
of
of
Ink.
Ink, which is a great place where we take our writing life day by day and our stories page by page.
So why don't you sit back, relax, and stay for a bit while we have a chat.
Yes, welcome. We are super excited to be back and have an amazing writer and author on our podcast today. He is the author of Henry Meets a Honeybee. He is the author and illustrator, if I remember correctly. So, there we are.
We'd like to welcome you and introduce you to Justin Ruger, who's on camera with us.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We're super excited. I am wondering about what part of your book was like the most fun for you to create.
Well, I don't know how I could talk about that without giving away part of the story. But when Henry turns into a honeybee, that was my favorite part to write and to illustrate because I was like, how do I put a 3D, action into a 2D page?
Yeah.
I really loved drawing the honeycomb and the flowers and everything, but my favorite was actually him turning in and out and back, him turning into a honeybee and back into a human.
Yeah, it's super cool. Yes.
So I am curious, what is the most difficult part of the artistic process?
Do you mean writing or illustrating, or
Illustrating.
both? Illustrating. Well, first was designing the pages. You have to make sure your artwork fits for what Amazon or your publishing company wants. And you have to make sure that you have enough in your page to convey your meanings and thoughts that match the wording. And I think if I had to say one thing that was the hardest, it was reading the little short blurb on the page and going, okay, how do I convey this with nothing moving?
Yeah.
And then the second part is you have to make sure that your readers enjoy the artwork. So for kids, I had to make sure that it was really bright and flowing. I didn't want it to do dark images. I mean, I know there's some books out there that use dark images, but to make them not afraid of honeybees, I did bright images and lots of color.
Well, you did great.
Yeah, that was very that was a bold and smart move, I might say, because like I opened up the book and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like so much color. It's like
Mm-hmm.
opening up like your own little world and just
Mm-hmm.
like I love just sitting down and reading it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt like a little kid again.
Yeah. It's truly amazing. I can say even as a 25-year-old, I very much enjoyed it. So, but I'm a kid at heart, so that goes without saying.
Yeah, we go to a lot of bee conferences,
Mm-hmm.
and it's amazing the amount of adults that come up to us after they've picked up the book for their grandchildren or their children, and they say, "I learned stuff in here."
Mm-hmm.
And most of it's spouses that came with their beekeeping partner.
That's awesome. Yeah, I could say that everything that I read, I did not know. So
Yep.
it was amazing to learn everything.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. Like I loved reading about like the hierarchy of the bee social, what do you call it, construct?
Structure.
Yeah, structure. Yeah. Like I'm like that was just so fascinating. I really thought it was just the queen bee and then the worker bees and that's it. But really
yeah.
there's like a whole lot more socially speaking as far as the bees go. Like I thought it was so neat.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I
They're
thought.
amazing creatures.
Sorry, you go ahead.
They're amazing. They are amazing creatures.
Yeah. So, what made you want to write in the genre of children's literature?
So I was talking with my mom, and she's a beekeeper. She's the one that actually got me started in beekeeping in 2016. And my siblings, both brothers, just had new babies. One is about to turn 2 in June, and the other one is about to turn 1 in May.
Oh,
So I was looking for books. I told my mom that I was looking for books to teach them about honeybees and not just show them cutely,
right.
because there's a lot of books out there that are cute and show pollination and have some color, but they don't teach about honeybees. And I was looking for books and I couldn't find any, so I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna write one. And I wrote the script, and I was like, yeah, it's okay. I don't know if this is what. And then my aunt, I actually dedicate the book to her. She passed away from COVID in October. She was like, I love this script. You need to continue doing it. And my mom read it, and she was like, this will teach so many children about something that is not well known.
Yeah.
Well, sorry about your aunt.
Thank you.
I am sorry as well. It is very difficult to lose someone you love.
I'm glad that she got to read the script before, before it became published. So like that's very special, and I love the fact that you dedicated the book to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually finished it. She went into the hospital for 2 weeks before she passed away, and I finished it the week after. I finished it the start of the second week, and then I was like, when she gets out, I'm gonna show it to her. And yeah, it kind of didn't happen, but I believe that she's with me every step of the way, because the way the book is blown up, and the success that we've had has beyond my capabilities to create.
That's
She's definitely with you and watching over you. I truly believe that.
yeah, same. I really do.
So, do you have any interest in branching outside of children's genre for writing?
I'm not allowed to say exactly what the book is about, but I have a contract with a publishing company to write a book centered around beekeeping. That's a chapter book. So I am working on that, and it'll probably come out in 2024.
Ooh, exciting.
Or two. Awesome.
Yes. Yay. Um, are you a plotter, a pantser, or a plantser?
Oh, what?
Yay,
I'm
this is
gonna.
exciting. Okay, so Jenna, would you like to say the plotter aspect?
In the writing community, there's a thing called plotter, pantsers, and planters. These a lot of writers who consider themselves plotters, they typically tend to like like plot the plot before they begin writing it. Like some do like three-tier structures or three-act structures, and some just like they plot it out in detail. Um, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that Harry Potter was one of those worlds that was created through plotting in advance. And then you have authors like Stephen King who were pantsers, and they just basically let the characters drive the story. Or are you like a plantser, somebody who's like in between?
I think I would be. Is it, you said pantser?
Yeah,
Pantser, yes.
You just kind of fly by the seat of your pants.
Yep.
Is that just?
basically.
Yeah. So I sit down and I just start to write, and as things unfold, I change things or I mold them to fit the story.
So yeah, yay. I'm super excited. I'm a pantser as well, so that's yay. Another one for
Um,
the team.
And,
so I did forget. Back to the last question. I am working on a book called Telling the Bees,
Mm-hmm.
and it got put on hold because of all the success with the children's book and this new contract. But it's basically a story about how a kid goes to help his grandfather on a farm at his apiary, where he keeps bees, and his grandfather passes away, and he actually there's a saying in old England that if anything happens with your family, or you have a success or a death, if you don't go out and tell the bees, which is go sit by the hive and tell them about your success or your death or your losses, they will leave the hive because they're not part of the family.
Oh.
So I'm writing a book that's trying to teach that to the general public through non or fiction way.
I can't wait to read that. That sounds amazing.
Like, I'm right now.
Yeah. That's super sweet. I've never heard of that before. I love that.
First for you, the plot or the characters, and why?
Say that one more time.
First for you, the plot or the characters, and why?
What comes first for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say the plot, because I know I have an idea in my head that I want to tell a story about.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't do that unless I have certain characters in, or certain characters that drive the story, I guess. That's why I said
Right.
I'm a pantser.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. What would you say is your quote unquote kryptonite as a writer?
My kryptonite as a writer.
Yes.
This is going to sound really weird, but I would have to say my mother, only
Okay.
because when I write, she's like my strongest critic.
Okay, yep.
So when I send her something and I'm like, hey, what do you think? She'll go, it's fantastic. Or she'll go, it sucks.
I
And I'm
mean,
like,
it's good to have someone that honest though, that can't, at least she's not like, "Oh, it's everything is great." Everything, like, you have someone who's going to be honest with you.
yeah, she never leads me on. She'll be
That's
like,
good.
yeah, it's terrible. When I wrote the, so I have a new book coming out on May 8th, and or on Mother's Day, and when I first wrote it and I got the proof from Amazon, she was reading it and she just started laughing, and I'm like, what are you laughing about? There's no jokes in there. And she was like, this is horrible. And I was like, and so she was like, you really need to go back to the drawing board, because I some of these pages I can't even tell what you're trying to explain.
Okay.
And I'm glad that she did that, because I went back to the drawing board and I now have two books that I think are fantastic, that are really going to help younger kids learn about beekeeping.
That's awesome.
that's awesome. Yes, I agree 100%. I love the fact that she's like both your kryptonite, but at the same time, she's also your strength as well.
Hmm.
When I had my TBI and my stroke, um, she I had a lot of people that said they were there for me, and some, showed it and some just told it. But she was definitely someone who has become my caregiver and is driving me everywhere that we need to go to do stuff for her business and for the book. And when I have seizures and issues, she is there to protect me and make sure that I keep going, so that I can so that we can continue to be successful.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she sounds like super mom.
Mm-hmm.
She is a super mom.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you have a mom that's so awesome like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, um, do you think there has been anything specifically that has helped or hindered you most when writing a book?
Hindered me. So since my stroke, I had to relearn how to write and read, and sometimes I can't put the words together in a structure that conveys my meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So it may take me, three, where somebody could sit down and take 30 minutes to write a page. It may take me a few days because each paragraph I have to spend a couple hours on to make sure that I'm conveying the meaning that I want to. And that was part, to go back to what I was saying about my second book that my mom was a critic on. I kind of brushed it and I just wrote it down and I drew some pictures. I drew the pictures that I wanted, and I was like, okay, I love the illustrations. Let's submit it and get the proof. And I didn't take the normal time that I do to write my paragraphs. So when I went back and read it, I went back and read it and I was like, this is fine. I think it's conveying the meaning. And then when mom started to tell me what she thought and why she thought it, I was like, okay, I totally get, why I did not get my point across.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can say from reading your book that the messages were perfectly conveyed. So you guys did a great job.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Um, I could definitely relate to the whole how sometimes the message you're trying to convey can take a little bit of time to to be expressed in writing. I've had days where I've had, I don't know if you've experienced that too, Luna, but I know
Mm-hmm.
I've like experienced that. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen every once in a while, and it's just like, you're right, you gotta go back to the drawing board. So, but sometimes that's okay because you really want to take your time when you're trying to really get your message across. You want to take your time and make sure that it gets expressed in a way that is best for you and best for the readers.
Yeah. With me currently, I'm working on my CMT book, and because I am very knowledgeable about it, like, I can just write all the, like, medical jargon, but I'm like, wait. So, like, someone who's just picking this up and reading this isn't going to, like, necessarily understand what in the world, like, peripheral neurology is. So I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back and, like, explain this better because it's not coming across like I want it to. So I have to sit back and be like, okay, no, like, don't just go kind of medical with this. Make sure I'm writing it so everybody can understand exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, put it into layman's terms.
Yeah, exactly. So,
If I may ask, how is everything going for you since your TBI?
It's a struggle. I have trouble focusing. I The TBI led to my stroke, so I have trouble walking. So I'm in a wheelchair.
mm-hmm.
Um, I have some memory issues, so I spend a lot of time rereading the first or 2 or 3 pages ahead of where I am, so that I can continue writing from where I stopped.
That makes sense.
Is everything like like is everything like slowly like getting back to, like, are you?
I've hit a plateau.
Okay.
Oh.
So I made a lot of gains being able to learn how to eat and use silverware, and I used my book as my Henry Meets a Honeybee. I used that as therapy because when I was in the rehab facility, I couldn't move my right arm at all. So
Oh.
I would take my left arm and I would hold the pencil in my right arm, in my right hand, and then I would use my left arm to move it around to draw pictures on my tablet. So I couldn't do it on paper because I was ripping the paper from the weight of my arm.
Mm-hmm.
So another supportive thing my mom did was get me a tablet so that I could draw on that. And as I kept moving my arm around, the brain has connections. So it started to make those connections, and I slowly was able to start using my right arm more. And the more that I did it, the better the pictures came. And I had a lot of back and forth where I would draw the first page, work on 3 pages, go back to the first page, fix something. You know, as my arm got stronger, I was continuously going back to older pages and updating the artwork.
That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I love that. Like
Hmm.
I love that. That you just not letting it get to you. You just keep on pushing through. That's really inspirational.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What would you say that you do to get inside your character's head?
You have a lot of good questions. It's making me think.
We try.
I spend a lot of time on character design, so I may be a pantser and I may just write, but when I get to a place where I have to add a character,
Hmm.
I step back and I'm like, okay, what do I want this character to do?
Hmm.
And what are their thoughts and feelings and their mannerisms? And it takes me a while to actually describe the character in writing so that I can translate that to, a description for the reader.
Hmm.
And with Henry, when I drew him, sorry, let me back up a bit. So the reason I chose Henry as a name is because I was looking up the titles of children's books, and one of the tips was whatever letter is in your second part of your sentence, the name should be the same letter. So
Okay.
at first I was gonna do Fern, the name of my nephew.
Hmm.
I was gonna do Fern meets Honeybee, but that's off because F and H don't flow together.
Hmm.
So Henry meets a honeybee actually flows better than Fern meets a honeybee. So at first, I modeled the character after my nephew. So I did his mannerisms. He's fearless, so I had to fib about Henry being scared of honeybees. He hasn't quite learned what fear is yet.
Yeah. That's
So
sweet.
you would say that Henry actually is inspired by your nephew then? Like the creation of Henry
Yes.
is
Oh,
fully inspired by your nephew. That's so awesome. Like, I love
yeah.
it.
I'm sure
So,
he's gonna love that.
right, right.
Yeah.
Are you doing like a sequel to Henry Meets a Honeybee or like maybe a series? Or is Henry Meets a Honeybee a standalone book?
Henry Meets a Honeybee is part of a series, and I I'm trying to have the next book out in that series on National Flamingo Day in June.
Oh,
But because it's Henry meets a flamingo, and it's actually Henry, doing the same thing he does with Honeybee. He, joins a flock of flamingos, and he travels around the world to learn about the different flamingos in different parts of the world.
oh, that's gotta be neat.
Yeah.
And then I was telling Willow earlier. I said that right?
It's Luna, but Luna Willows. Yes, that's fine.
Sorry, Luna.
You're fine.
I was telling Luna earlier that when I posted my Henry Meets a Honeybee book in the book hangout group on Facebook, I was actually contacted by a 94-year-old woman named Betty Toole, and she started writing a book about honeypot ants in 1970s as a professor, or not a professor, a student in educational literature.
Hmm.
And she did what she had to do to get the grade in the class, but it never went anywhere, and she wanted it to. So she sent me a message and she was like, "Hey, I would like you to take your artistic spin and put it on the research and book that I have started." So I did that, and she has the review. She's reviewing the proof right now. I think I misunderstood some of the, like the anthill is really small, close to the ground, and I drew it as really tall. So there's some misunderstandings of the illustrations that I have to change that she's going to get back to me. But on her 95th birthday in October, we're going to publish that book.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that's super amazing. When I heard about it, I was in awe. I was just like, that is so cool. Like, this many years later, it's finally going to be finished. Like, that is so cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
And I have the 2 books coming out on Mother's Day called Honey Teaches Beekeeping to Kids and Honey Teaches Beekeeping. And they go into the protective clothing that beekeepers wear, how to tell if your queen is laying eggs, if the eggs have become larvae, how to extract honey. So the kids' book is 35 pages, I believe, and it's larger font and goes into less detail, where the young adult version is 60 pages and is a smaller font, so it's a lot more information and goes into like the treatment of pests, where the children's book just says these are the pests.
All right.
And one thing you did not ask me yet, and if you do, I'm sorry. if you planned on, I'm sorry. Is one thing that I really learned from writing my first book was, if once you get to the end of Henry Meets a Honeybee, there's a few pages where I had a lot of information to give, and instead of breaking it apart in separate pages, I put it all in one page. So that's one thing that I learned from my first book, and my subsequent books will all have, less wording on the page and more pages, rather than less pages and more wording. Because I felt like on some pages the kids will get tired of reading a long paragraph with the same artwork.
Right. I mean, that's great.
I still thought it was pretty good though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
Honestly, I don't even read.
Okay.
After my stroke, I don't mean that to be rude or anything. I loved to read as a kid, and then I got into before my stroke and TBI, I was a PhD student at Catholic University in DC for nuclear physics, and all my reading went from fiction to nonfiction.
Yeah.
Scientific papers. And when you do that so long, you start to hate reading a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then after my stroke, I had to relearn how to read and write, and I get fatigued reading long chapter books.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I don't really have any writers that are motivators, except I can say one. I guess after I think about it, I can say one. Frank Mortimer. He is a writer in the bee community, and he wrote a book called Bee People and the Bugs We Love. It's all about his journey from a novice beekeeper to a master beekeeper, and the people that he met along the way. So he breaks them, he stereotypes them, and he's like, you've got the cowboy that just runs into the hive and does whatever he's going to do, and he doesn't plan it. And then you've got the surgeon that puts on the full gear and gets into the hive, and everything is meticulously planned, and he tells funny stories the entire book. So I really got motivated by him to continue writing books.
That's so cool.
Yeah, awesome. So, speaking of books growing up, what children's books did you grow up reading that you loved?
Do you remember the Madeline books?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
The French girl, the little young French girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes, those were on the back of our toilet for reading in the bathroom. So I read those a lot.
Aww.
um, I read a lot of Nancy Drew and it was not the Hardy Boys. What was the one with the boys that were mystery solvers too? Do you remember?
Um,
No.
no, I can't say I do. I remembered like the
Okay,
boxcar stuff, but no.
and then I also read a lot of the Harry Potter series.
Nice.
Yes.
You're speaking Luna's language now.
Yes, you are. Big Harry Potter fan. I mean, I have Harry behind me right there. So, yeah.
Hmm.
Love Harry Potter. Yeah. That's so cool. That's awesome. So, what would you share about something about yourself that readers don't already know?
I don't know. Um, I mean, we talked about my schooling before. We talked about my stroke and my TBI. We talked about my seizures. Um, oh, my favorite movie is Follow That Bird with Big Bird.
Yes. Love it.
Alright. So I have a random question here. What got you into beekeeping?
So my mother always wanted to keep bees, and when we lived in near Virginia Beach in Virginia, we lived in a. My grandfather built a house, and in like the 1950s. He built a house, and around the neighborhood became like this huge um, rich lawyers and judges and doctors neighborhood, and we were just a little house inside this big neighborhood. And my mom wanted to put bees in the property, but she was afraid that the neighbors would have issues with it, so she never did it. And when we moved to Culpeper, which is near Charlottesville, where UVA is,
Mm-hmm.
she, my brother, they came out with this thing called blow hive, and it was a different. Usually, when you extract honey, you put the frames in an extractor, and it spins it really fast, and the honey um, flies out and hits the side, drains down to the bottom, and there's a little spigot down there that you can flip, and it comes out into a filter. So she doesn't like to do that because honeybees will put the same honey from the same plant into a frame. So they won't mix the pollen and the nectar from one plant in one set of honeycomb versus the other. So they came out with this thing in Australia called the flow hive, and it's basically um, human manufactured wax comb that the bees fill up with honey, and then you put in a like a lock, like a turnkey, and you crack the seal on the honey, and it drains all the honey out without hurting the bees.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So
More about the bee structure, like the social structure?
talk more about it.
Yeah.
Do you want me to finish my first story, or do you want me to?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, so my brother saw this flow hive on online and Indiegogo. I don't know if you know what Indiegogo is or like Kickstarter.
Kickstarter, yeah.
They okay, so Indiegogo is just like Kickstarter, and they were doing the hives for like $400 a piece, and my mom bought two of them, so we had to wait 2 years, and they finally came, and then mom took a class and we got our bees, and at the time I was in a wheelchair, so and our yard was muddy, so I couldn't get out there, so I took pictures with a zoom camera. So that's how she got into beekeeping, and then I got into beekeeping by helping her.
That's awesome.
Yes.
And then the social structure of honeybees is you have the queen who uses pheromones, which is a special smell. It's like a chemical smell to talk to the other bees, and she tells the bees, what to do, where to go. And then there's the drones, and the drones are males, but they don't do anything except for mate with the queen.
Okay.
And once they mate with the queen, they die.
That's sad.
Yeah, so a little bit TMI. Their member actually explodes after they're done mating.
Oh.
And then when the worker bees are the main ones that control the hive. I mean, they have scouts that will go if the hive gets too big. They have scouts that will go out and find a new home, and then the queen will follow them to a new home. They have jobs such as cleaning, foraging, nursing the baby bees. If the queen gets sick, they will make new honeybees or make a new queen by filling a cell with royal jelly. And if the once winter comes, this is another horrible part about bees that I don't like. I mean, I love bees, but once winter comes, they'll actually kick all the male bees out, and they'll tear their wings off,
Oh, wow.
and then they'll tear their wings off and they'll kick them out. So because they can't, the drone bees don't do anything to mate.
Right.
So the worker bees have to feed them, have to
Right.
take care of them, and there's not enough energy or there's not enough resources in the winter to be able to take care of all the male bees and the worker bees. So they kick the worker bees out of the hive and just take care of the queen and the worker bees. They call it queen and the winter bees. And the honeybees live for about 5 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks during their lifespan, and they start out as cleaners and they become foragers at the very end. And then some of them will die while they're foraging. Some will die in the hive from being too old, and they'll get pushed out. And the winter bees will actually be able to live 3 to 4 months for the whole winter season before they start making new bees in the spring.
Wow. I mean, I don't know how they survive Minnesota winters, because Minnesota winters are like 6 months long. So, I do not know how they do it here.
Yeah, like that's so amazing. And it's like you see honeybee hives and you see hives in general, like not just honeybees, just like like um like ground bees and so on and so forth. And then you see you see their nests. You see them building their nest when spring comes, but then it's like as soon as it starts getting cold, like it's like everybody abandons the beehive. Like I don't know. It's just like, are they still like inside those hives, or do they like go
Mm-hmm.
somewhere and hibernate?
Nope, they all stay inside the hives.
Wow.
But they don't come out unless the temperature is above 50 degrees.
Okay.
So they'll put the queen in the middle, and they'll all join a big ball around her to keep her warm. and then if it gets too cold, they won't even move one frame over to eat, so they may starve to death because their job is to keep the queen alive.
Oh.
And in Minnesota, most of them will wrap their hives in a plastic to keep the temperature warm because they keep their temperature, I believe, 96 degrees at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, we have yet to reach 50 degrees yet. Yesterday was like mid 30s. So it is still very cold. I'm ready for the sun to be out. I'm sick of this cold weather.
I know, right? I know it's been like in the 50s, but it's been like fluctuating. Like we'll have one nice day where it's like 56 degrees, and then the next day it's like back to 40s. It's like, what are we doing here, Mother Nature? Get it together.
Yesterday
And
was the
that
nicest. Yeah.
and that's hard for the bees because the flowers on nice days will bloom, and then they'll die off on the cold days.
Yep.
So when there's cold snaps, all the flowers that got tricked into coming up by the few nice days in a row will die, and then the honeybees don't have any food. So that's why it's very important not to kill dandelions
Yep.
because that's one of the first foods that honeybees have after the winter.
Oh. Well, see, now I have a whole new perspective on dandelions. I don't think I'm gonna destroy them now.
Yeah, no.
I like, we cut them with our lawnmower and stuff, and it's just like it used to drive me nuts. So it's like I'm like, oh my gosh, where do all these dandelions come from? Well, now I know what their purpose is. Like, let's not kill the dandelions, people.
Yeah.
You can make tea with them too.
You can make what?
Tea.
Tea, dandelion tea.
Yes, drink.
I've seen some at like local farmers markets. They sell like little packets for the tea. And I haven't had the nerve to try it yet, but I've seen it and that's super cool.
Look into that.
Yeah. So
Sorry. I want to go back to that whole cold snap thing. So as a beekeeper, what do you guys do to keep your bees, to protect your bees during the cold snaps?
In Virginia, we don't have to do much because they have the temperature high enough. They will cluster down, and you don't want to take away because our weather fluctuates so much. Where we can have a 40-degree day and the next day be 75, and then the next day be 40. If we wrap our hives on the hot days, they'll overheat.
oh,
So we don't do anything to protect them. But up in places like Minnesota or Canada, where you're going to have that 6-month winter where it's not going to get above 50 degrees until April or not April, May or June. Then you can wrap your hives, and when it starts to get warmer, you just take the wrap off to protect them.
what do they use to like wrap? Is it like plastic or do you?
Yeah, plastic.
That's cool.
And sometimes they'll use insulation too.
Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to think of like what could be used that wouldn't actually damage the hive because you don't want to like damage it either. So that's super cool. One thing before we started that I thought was super cool is that he told me, I told him I was afraid of bees because I'm allergic. And he said that actually if you get stung, instead of like pulling it out, if you use your fingernail and like flick it out, I think you said, or brush it out.
Like scrape it. Yeah,
Yeah.
scrape it or brush it.
That it helps because if you try and pluck it out, the sac explodes. And I had never known that. Yeah. Like that's super cool to me, and I feel like a lot of people need to know that because like when you get stung and you're allergic, if you're actually making the venom get in you more, I guess like that's not good. So like brush it out.
Right? And I really have to say, like, I really think it's amazing that you wrote this book and that you are writing a series on beekeeping and just like the whole thing about bees because a lot of people are really afraid of bees. And it's just like not only that, but bees, I feel like bees are one of the most important things to our ecosystem
Yeah.
that are underappreciated.
Yeah.
Did you know that they're not actually native to North America?
No?
Yeah, honeybees not native to North America. They were actually brought over by settlers. And if you go into some pollination groups, and like I went to a couple pollination groups on Facebook, and I shared my book, and there's always one or two people in the comments that are like, "Well, did you put a page in your book about how honeybees are not native to North America, and they're actually helping in the decline of other pollinators?" But we have such a large pollination, such a large population, not population of people that commercial beekeepers are necessary to pollinate, large fields these days.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
if we don't have them, I believe, what is it, the statistics? I think I read somewhere online where it says if bees were like completely extinct, like on the whole spectrum of bees, like there would be 3 years of veget like plants and vegetation and stuff like that, and then after that, we're all, you know,
Kind of screwed. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a nice way of putting it.
How in agreement are you with that statement?
And with the statement you just made,
Yeah.
um, I don't know about 3 years because the bees pollinate the food, and the food would go first.
Right.
So whereas trees and like corn, we could have corn because corn is not pollinated by bees; it's pollinated by wind.
Oh, okay.
So that's why they plant them so close together, is because when the wind blows, it carries the pollen from one corn stalk to another.
Yeah, get that.
So I would think 1 to 1.5 years, because we still do have stores of food, but I don't think we would have any fresh food.
Right.
Well,
Because
that's
bees
sad.
incredibly important to the pollination of vegetation and foods. And without that, it'd be like, I think, on the grand scale of things, like no animals, because a lot of animals eat off of, they live off of that,
Hmm.
stuff. And then a lot of us live off of not only the plants, but we live off the animals too. I mean, depending on what our preference of eating is,
Yeah.
But either way, we rely on bees. So
And it's crazy to learn how much, because I genuinely, like, I knew they came out in summer. I knew that I avoided anywhere there was flowers in summer because I didn't want to carry an EpiPen. Um, I know that their honey is delicious and that I use it in my tea. But that's about it. So, like, going through this experience and learning everything, like, really opens my eyes to it. Like, that they're amazing creatures and how much we really need them. And, like, yeah, I'm very happy to have learned everything that I did. And that's why I think everyone should get this book, even if you don't have kids. Like, you should get this and learn about it and, like, open your eyes.
yep, I agree. I mean, it's beautiful work.
It is.
Thank you. I agree with you guys too.
So, what advice would you give to an aspiring writer working on their first book?
Be patient. Um, be thorough, and be very careful with who you trust to edit your book, and listen to those people that edit your book. I actually had to put a second version of my book out because the American Bee Journal said that I had fall produce in springtime. And my grandmother and another beekeeper do my editing for me because I'm cheap and can't afford to pay an official person. But they mentioned that, and I guess I forgot it or didn't pay attention to their suggestion, and I actually had to make that change and then resubmit the book to be able to get my article in the American Bee Journal this month.
Oh, okay.
So if somebody makes a suggestion, you don't have to blindly follow it, but you need to do better than I did and actually really consider it. And don't be afraid to get multiple editors. If you can afford professional editors, that's great. If you can't, do your best to get people that you know are qualified, and also think very hard about how you want to publish your book. So self-publishing, that's what I did with Henry Meets the Honeybee, is great. You have more control. You have to price your books higher to have any type of anything come back to you. You have to price it higher.
Right.
And but on the other side, traditional publishing, you lose rights to your book, and you may get a nice check at the beginning, but you're not going unless you become J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, and you sell millions of copies. You're not going to see any of those royalties for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So just really, really consider the route that you want to go, because you have full control over your mistakes, and it's on you if you do self-publishing, but you also don't make those mistakes in traditional publishing because you have a team from the publisher that takes care of it for you.
Right. So,
I hope that answered the question.
yeah. Jenna, you have experience with self-publishing. You have.
Yeah, I also have experience with an actual publisher who published my very first book. The contract is going to be coming up at the end of this year, so I'm going to actually have to take it off the market and do it as like a second edition and then self-publish it myself, because I don't like the process of relying on somebody else to do all the publishing for me. Like, it's just like what Jessica's saying, you have much more self-control over like pretty much everything. You know what I'm saying? You have control over everything from the cover design to like everything. You have control over it all. And yeah, he's right. You can include as many editors as you want and so on and so forth. So yeah, publishing is not an easy task for any author. In fact, a lot of authors may get their first book written and then they have no idea where to go. So definitely good advice there, Justin, for anybody who's looking to get their first book out there on the market.
Yeah.
You have to remember that self-publishing, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Yep.
You have to market yourself. You have to sell it yourself. You have to do everything yourself.
Yep.
Traditional publishing, they'll do all of that for you, but you lose out on everything.
Right. Like, what is the price for having them do it for you, basically?
Yeah.
All right. So, do you have any last words that you would like to say to the audience before we wrap this up?
You can get the. Well, sorry. First, I want to say thank you to both of you for having me on this channel and giving me a chance to talk about my book and my future books, and giving me an outlet to express some of the health things that I've gone through. At first it was hard for me to talk about it, and as I've talked about it and shared my story, I hope that I can be I don't want to be an inspiration, but everyone tells me that, what you overcome kind of makes you an inspiration sometimes.
Yeah.
So if I can inspire one person to follow their dreams and pick up a laptop and continue writing that book that they gave up on, that would be amazing. And no, it's never too late to. And what I would like to say to the audience is, it's never too late to follow your dreams. And if your dream is to write a book, you never know how far it's going to go. And the only way that you can tell is by doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's one more thing that we would like to bring up to the audience is that the fact that Justin actually just recently started a nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
in regards to beekeeping. So, before we wrap this up, why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
I was researching. I'm in a wheelchair, and we actually lost our honeybees because the homeowners association said that they were livestock, and by the federal government, they are considered livestock, and we couldn't have them in our homeowners association anymore. So we had to put them on separate property that I couldn't get to and access from my wheelchair. So somebody else took over them. But I was looking on the internet for help for somebody who's disabled to continue beekeeping,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and I couldn't find anything. I found lots of help for veterans,
Mm-hmm.
which is great, but nothing. I'm not like there was many nonprofits to help veterans, and there's bees for vets, hives for heroes, heroes to hives. It's just so many that are doing the same thing, but nothing for the general public. If you've been a beekeeper for 50 years and you have a stroke, if the general public, that means most general public, that means giving up. But
Yeah.
it doesn't have to. So I made a nonprofit called Accessible Beekeeping that will do an experimental apiary and help determine which of the hives is the best hive for somebody with disabilities. I also want to do research and design, fabricate accessible hardware, working with Agribility in Michigan. So there's a person with Parkinson's who shakes a lot, and I'm trying to
Hmm.
help design something that can hold the frame and keep the frame of honeybees and honey steady. Because if you shake it too much, you'll make the bees mad,
Yeah.
or the comb will fall out. So I started a nonprofit. We're currently waiting on the 501c3, which is tax exempt status. The business is already done. It's a non-stock corporation. If anybody wants to support, you can go to accessiblebeekeeping.org and purchase shirts to support our nonprofit. And if you want to get a copy of the book, you can go to hippiechicapiary.com.
We will have the links of both of those in the description for the video, so they can just go in the description and click on either one of those.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing all that information about your nonprofit.
Yeah.
It's like everything, like teaching us about the honeybees and just writing. Henry meets a honeybee. Like, go you, keep on rocking
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Keep on writing. I can't wait to see what comes out in the future.
You can actually pre-order the Mother's Day books now if anybody's interested.
Oh, awesome. Well, hey guys, Mother's Day is coming up, so
Get for that too in the video description.
yeah, definitely. Alrighty.
Well, thank you.
That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's conversation at the Flow of Ink.
Yes. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we hope to see you on next week's episode where we will have another amazing author named Amber. We'll discuss her amazing book called The Adventures of Mischief Mishka in Central Park. So, yeah, can't wait.
And if you have any questions for us or for Justin, please drop a comment below and then we will address it in our Q&A portion of the beginning of next week's episode. We promise that we won't bite. Or
Also, Yes, or Sting. Also, don't forget to hit that bell icon and subscribe to our channel so you get notified for every single episode that we post. Again, thank you for joining us here at the Flow of Ink, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So, bye-bye for now.